So I'm Surya, and I'm one of the co-organizers for today's session. And I'm thrilled you're here for what promises to be a genuinely different kind of conversation about technical writing. So most webinar, as we might know in this space, talk about best practices in theory, but we are going to talk about what's actually happening right now inside fast-moving tech companies in 2026. So, as you know, we have four, world-class practitioners who live this every single day, and they are ready to pull back the curtain on the real challenges, like the slacking that happens during mid-sprint, the documentation depth, and so on. So, I'm happy to welcome Yakov Simon, who is scaling the documentation at Cato Networks, Yossi, who's leading the technical writing space at BigID, Naomi, who's driving the content strategy at HiBob, and also Gideon, who's handling documentation and training at Thailand. So, welcome everyone. So, over to you, Gidi.
Yeah. Thank you, and thank you for inviting me, and thank you everybody for joining. It's very exciting that we were able to get this going. Yeah, we've tried to have some events here recently, but because of different sort of reasons, we weren't able to pull it off. So it's exciting to finally get to present to everybody. So the way I guess we had this planned was, I'll kick off some questions to everybody and see, what their day to day is, and then I'll explain what my day to day is because past year we've seen a huge transition. When I started doing technical writing 15 years ago, I was writing thinking of like how is this documentation going to look like in a book, and then after it transitioned to a PDF. Then it transitioned to online documentation and reading for audiences who were looking and going to some very specific articles, trying to troubleshoot some sort of issue. And today, I'm writing a mix of online documentation and documentation for agents. And so I'd like to hear what everybody else is doing because yeah. So sometimes I end up working in a bubble, and so this is a great way to get other ideas from other people, especially from other people who are a lot smarter than me. So here, so first question, I'll kick it off, and then I'll see what you guys have to say. So, what is the first documentation related tool you guys are using every morning? So it's the first day of the week, whatever. You walk into the office. What is the first AI related tool you guys are using? Or sorry, documentation related tool. I'll kick it over to Yossi. Just I'll mix it.
Okay. All right. So honestly, it's kind of a tangential kind of document related tool, and it's Jira because I know people might have expected me to say like a writing tool, but it's actually Jira because I think that as a documentation team, we're not just writers, right? We're actually a delivery team. So just like engineers and others in the company, we have deadlines and stakeholders and so on. So in my team, we work according to sprints and story points, and that actually is, I think, kind of that kind of discipline is undervalued in documentation because by making sure that you are aware of all the tasks that you have to do, it helps you estimate your effort properly and have real conversation about scope and say, this kind of won't fit into this sprint. We're going to have to push it off. You don't want to overcommit and to deliver. And so having visibility into all of that, I think that's really important to me. So understanding my team's velocity, how much work we can produce, all that kind of thing, really helps make planning more accurate. And I think planning is actually kind of critical to technical writing, especially when you're in a fast-paced company. So yeah, I mean, you know, tracking and being accountable for your deliverables, that's all part of the technical writing experience. So yeah, so that's the first thing that I check. Right, is my is the Bible of like what I'm going to do the rest of the week and what my teams are going to do the rest of the week.
That's interesting because that's also in line with you see all these things on LinkedIn like technical writers are they say we are only actually writing 10-20% of the time, and with the AI now it's even less so, and so it's more about
Mm,
managing information and managing knowledge,
mm,
and then less about the actual writing anymore. So if like I guess like a year or 2 years ago it was 20% were writing, 10%. I imagine today it's a lot less, but it's also managing those data sources. Okay, all right. So now same question to Yakov. So a document related tool. First thing
Right.
you do in the morning.
So it's similar to Yossi, but with a different tool is I go into Slack. It's also because a manager, not a writer, but I'm there trying to find out what did I miss, during the American hours, of the previous, looking at DMs and messages in certain channels. I also Really enjoy the Slack ecosystem. So the canvases and lists are very easy to work with, and it's very nice because you can easily make a Jira from a Slack message. So I find it a very flexible tool, and you rely on unread messages really as ways to help remind, for things that I need to take care of. And I'll just to also to follow up a little bit with Yossi, what he said, which is that I've been at Cato since 2019, and we're a cloud-based SaaS networking solution. But I came from Checkpoint, which was an on-prem solution. And there you have, we had like one release a year. At Cato, we have once a week. So I seem to have many more documentation emergencies. Like I thought, when I was going to be a tech writer, everything would be, I'm not a programmer. No one, I've literally even was once woken up in the middle of the night to have to deal with, an emergency. But I think being in that space of critical SaaS infrastructure for our customers, Slack really helps in terms of being able to keep on top of high priority items.
Yeah. So Slack was also my answer, but for different reasons. So I'll get to that. But yeah. So we're using Slack as well. So okay, Naomi probably has the most interesting answer. So Naomi, sorry to add pressure.
I was actually just thinking, what a shame that I'm coming after Yakov, because I was also going to say Slack, mostly for the same reasons. It's the best way to orient yourself first thing in the morning. On my team, we don't do documentation per se. We're UX writers, and we're in charge of all the strings that go into the product. So there's always, like Yakov says, American hours or European hours and days. So we need to catch up with requests. We're also in charge of all the keys for the developers. So if we're not responsive, then we become a bottleneck. And so I'm chiefly looking for quick wins to see if I can bat something off. If it's just, there's a word missing or this key doesn't exist, we only need one. And to remind myself, I also, kind of an inbox zero kind of person. So anything that I mark as unread means I still need to deal with it. So that for me is the best way to handle the ad hoc requests and the urgent requests, because I should know everything sort of that's overarching and ongoing by nature, by, having lived and breathed it for the recent past. So then my next tool after that would be Figma, probably because most of our work is in Figma, and we are updating our content strings within the design and using a plugin to then export out to Localize, which is our translation management tool.
Okay, cool. So we're also using Slack. When I joined Island, I'm also like Naomi. I'm a zero email sort of inbox person. And so when I joined Island, I started sending all these invites saying, "Hey, I'm Gideon. Hey, I just joined the company," and nobody answered. And it turns out that nobody uses email anymore. So everything is done through Slack. Everything is automated in Slack. So Jira is automated in Slack. Our AI agents are automated in Slack. And so yeah. So we're also, everything we do is in Slack. It's flexible. Also the communication, the different time zones. Yeah, and just the ability to integrate with all the different connectors and integrations they support. So we have Figma integrated. We have Jira, Confluence. Basically everything. The whole company is managed through Slack, and so we have to do the same as well. So yeah. So
Yeah, I will say as well that Slack does have an AI feature that I quite like, because I'm dealing with people who, what I call the personas who were not as good at English at school. And so I'm dealing with a lot of designers, and they were maybe typically not the best English. So they have a tendency to write a lot of information in Hebrew. So I use the summarized thread AI feature a lot of times to just get an overview and expedite the highlights into my brain and not have to sort of sift through a conversation or something.
Yeah. That's that's one of the, I think one of the later questions as well, because the summarize thing is really, it's an amazing feature. Especially we're integrated with Salesforce, and so you get these long threads, and I have no patience to read all that stuff. So the summarize thing's amazing. It's a lifesaver.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So I'll move on to question 2. So here I'll start off with Yakov this time. So if you can, show us or explain to us one feature you generally can't live without anymore. as a technical writer, or in Naomi's case, a documentation, a content person?
So I have a very boring answer. One of my guiding principles is KISS, keep it simple, stupid. So I need and love having separation of content and style. Just authoring in an environment where we can just focus on the content. So, just writing in Markdown, I mean, I can share or not actually, apparently, but that's okay. But anyway, so just, it's really nice in Doc360 to be able to focus on Markdown. I came from another tool where it had a very heavy system. I won't call it out by name, but it had a very heavy system, very steep learning curve. I didn't mind it, but it's nice to come in Markdown, which is super easy. I was also like, I think so Yossi and I know each other for a while, and writing in Word always reminds you of like one of the worst experiences where you're stuck trying to get the content to match Word's formatting, and you're just banging your head against the wall. So that to me is a great key feature. And the other one I'll just mention, which is less boring, I think version control is also very important to me. Being able to clearly go back to early versions and having comments so that I can tell exactly what is the change, especially like you have a bug fix and you want to be able to see what's the Jira ID for that generated that fix. That's a very, very important topic content feature. So yeah, that's what I would say. Markdown and version control.
Yeah. So Markdown was also my answer, but okay.
Well, we're well okay.
No, I love going into the code, especially with the Claude code now. So I guess I'll explain my answer later. But okay, Naomi, what are you doing? Because again, you're a UX writer, which is a lot. I always find it more interesting what you're doing than what we're doing. So the technical
Yeah, I
writing is just
think
a point. I love UX writing.
we write shorter texts and you're, more long form. So
Yeah, but shorter doesn't mean easier. Shorter is a lot. It's a
true.
lot. I'll explain. When I was in university, I started off in the U.S. and the professors would say, "Hey, you have to write a paper." I would just write 10 pages. Great, no problem, and I would get an A. Great. And then when I moved over to England, and they said, "Give us a paper," but it's only up to 2,000 words, and that was a nightmare. It was so much more challenging, and you have to be careful, and you have to start choosing and defining which information is more important. It's so much more difficult.
Yeah, absolutely. I always say that every word needs to audition for its place in the sentence because we're trying to say something understandable in as short words as possible and in a clear way. So it's like we have to really assess which word is important. I went when I was thinking about this question, less a feature and more a program. I would really recommend and encourage GPT, which I use as a sort of I don't know, a sort of extension of my own mind. And I do a lot of conversations with GPT. Now knows me pretty well.
Did you create your own GPT or?
Basically, I think I set up initially sort of a few rules of sort of how to talk to me and who I am, sort of giving it the context, but also to learn from all of my interactions with it. So every conversation, it's learning more and more. And I find it really useful to come and approach everything, absolutely every task, especially new tasks, like how can I do this better and how can I do this using AI? Because we have a few AI tools that our company has given. We have Notebook LM, we have Cursor, we have Claude, some people have, we have Gemini, of course. And so we have a whole host of things. And, it's sort of trying to figure out what can help me, what can help expedite my processes and make things easier to really sort of work in AI, but with AI and that kind of thing. So it's like if I'm writing content, I'll often take it out to GPT. It has my style guide. It knows, our tone and voice and that kind of thing. And I say, hey, give me 10 different variations. And then, I'll pick sort of half of one and half of another one, depending on, where it hit the mark, where it missed the mark a little bit. But also in terms of someone on my team is having this issue or, I need to collaborate with a team that aren't being very responsive or something like that. And I'll just talk it through with GPT and get its advice. And it's really good. Like I don't want to say that it will replace psychologists or something, but it does quite a good job of like sort of listening to problems, counseling, and validating you and making not making you feel stupid, which is always an advantage.
Yeah, so we did something similar because like I'm also handling UX writing here, and we have about 30 PMs now, and they're all running very, very fast, and all their developers are on steroids now with Claude. And so we essentially we created an agent that sits within Figma that I define the style guide for and everything. And so they're not content people. They're 29 of the 30, I think, are ex-developers who became PMs. And so they're not content people. They don't like content. They don't care about words. And so essentially we created a BigID bot that does it scans over their Figmas and generates content for them. Now, it's not perfect, but it gets them a lot for it takes care of the grammar in English for one. So that it knocks out. It also maintains the consistency. So that also helps. Sometimes, as you said, the meaning and auditioning for every single word, it's not there yet. And that's where, again, you still need to work with it and you still need some sort of human supervisor. But yeah,
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 we're
that's what
actually
we're
sort
doing
of
now.
pivoting our style guide, which was, I think that as writers, we have a lot of information in our heads and we intuitively know what's going to work, what's not going to work, what the customer, is thinking when they're going through a certain flow and therefore what information they need and that kind of thing. And we're now trying to pivot our style guide in order to help the AI learn that in this situation, we were doing it very tied with our design system in Figma. So if it's an error message, you know, the user is coming with this kind of
Frustrated,
feeling.
yeah.
And so therefore we want you to respond in this way and help them try to self-serve a resolution rather than, that kind of thing. So it's actually been quite interesting to and again, I've used GPT to help me, how can I best rewrite these guidelines so that AI will be able to parse it and use it in order to implement better texts in the kind of thing that you're describing. And we can help PMs write texts and that kind of thing. So it's definitely been a different way of thinking because I think the style guide was originally written with the understanding that whoever's reading it knows a certain amount and who, intuitively can sort of take a shorter paragraph and use it in order to help them versus the AI where you have to be quite explicit. Don't say this, do say that, and so on and so forth. So,
Yeah,
it's a
it's interesting. The style again, the style guide. Yeah, the style guide for I think technical writers, where as opposed to UX writers, is a bit different. Where you have to explain kind of the different like voices and tones and situations. And so one of the things we had to do with this bot that we were creating was we had to feed it examples. Like so, if it's an error, somebody's already frustrated, so be nice. Don't start making jokes. Don't be happy. Oops, yeah, you got lost. No, and also for our audience, we're dealing with a more technical audience, so like the tone has to be more professional anyway.
Yeah.
But yeah, we had to the way we did it with the style guide is, we explained the different emotions involved, and then we also fed it examples. So do this, don't do this, do this, don't do this for different situations. But okay, all right, Yossi, yeah. So
Well, just to follow on from your conversation, we have something very similar. We have a very extensive style guide for microcopy, and one of the UX designers created a plugin to Figma that uses our style guide, and the style guide has become a set of rules for AI. So what it does is it really helps the UX designers and the PMs come out with a really good first shot at the microcopy, right? It may not be 100%, but it's pretty close. And and because it's pretty close, if something slips by the technical writing team for some reason, because they didn't run it by us, or it was a last minute thing, and there was no time, and whatever other excuse they might have, at least what goes into the product is something that's pretty close, right? That's good enough, if not if it's not perfect. So I think having an extensive style guide that an AI can understand and use as a set of rules for microcopy is a really big advantage. So yeah. So should I answer the question about the feature that I generally work without?
yeah, I think so. Yeah. If you want to add anything else, you can.
Okay, so I went in a different direction altogether, and my answer to the question is the feedback mechanism in Document360. That is a feature that I really think is probably the most underrated feature in any documentation platform. Because as technical writers, we can kind of fall into the trap of thinking our job is done when an article is published. Like feedback just pulls you out of that, right? And when a reader tells you that something is confusing or quotes it down or something like that, then that's a signal that tells you that something didn't work, right? So we use feedback to do more than just improve articles. So when we see a pattern, the same concept is confusing users over and over again, right? That's a flag for us to go and talk to the UX team and say, hey, maybe there's something in the flow that's not working properly. Maybe there's something confusing. So, it puts the technical writers into a position where we can use user feedback directly as in the feedback loop to the UX team and have an effect on the product. So, but I think also there's something a bit more fundamental about feedback, that it reminds you that documentation teams can be very insular, I think, because we live in our own tools and our own little world, right? And we forget that there's like a real person sitting there trying to actually use a document. And as technical writers, the very first thing that we're taught is, put yourself in the shoes of the user, right? And so we try to do that, right? And then we say, okay, we've done it, but then maybe we didn't actually put ourselves into the shoes of the user, or maybe the user's trying to do something a bit different to what we expected, and they're hitting a brick wall. So this feedback, this feedback mechanism, like it really, really matters. And I think that is something that me and my team can't do without, because without that input from our users and our customers, I think that our documentation won't be as useful. And so it really helps to lift up the quality and the usability.
I just want to jump in. I follow up on what Yossi said, but we created a Slack channel for internal users to give us feedback on articles. And it's incredibly popular, and incredibly useful, because they're also, it's not just support engineers. A lot of times, a lot of, SEs, the sales engineers or PS, who are, maybe try to help a customer configure a feature, and they're like, no, this was not clear in the documentation, or, I mean, half of them are typos and broken links, but the other half are substantive and, help us really out a lot. So so that's, in a similar way, because, yes, customers are, you're right, 100%, but also internal stakeholders also very helpful. So
Yeah. So again, you kind of made me consider changing my answer. Again, I'm still with the markdown thing, because I don't have access to CSS.
Stick to your guns, kid.
Yeah. So I don't have access to CSS, and I can do some amazing things with Claude Code, put to the markdown. It's a great things very quickly. That being said, I also used to like feedback, but one of the things that I've started using more is looking at, like, I used to look at search terms, and I would try to understand what people were looking for. Like, so somebody comes in and they type SSO. Okay, so I say, okay, so maybe I need to invest a little bit more in my SSO documentation, but I had no real understanding of what their intent was. And then we had the feedback channel. Okay, great. So I could get some feedback there, but not a lot of people always use the feedback channel, especially when they're frustrated. Sometimes they write angry feedback, just angry, profane things. Okay, but what's interesting now are the AI queries. So being able to actually go in and see what people were specifically asking. So there you can really understand intent. And so I'm still sticking with Markdown. That's the final answer. But another feature that's interesting is the being able to the analytics for AI queries. That's a cool thing. So anyway, the next question is, who did I start off with last time?
I think you're up to Naomi now. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm trying to mix up. So now it falls on Yaakov. So
No,
what is
Naomi
the?
goes
I
first.
think I did start last time, so I think
Yeah,
we're
yeah.
over to
Oh,
over to
sorry.
Naomi. That's what we're
No,
trying to help you. We're trying to help you out
Sorry,
there.
Naomi. It's your turn.
I didn't mind.
Oh, yeah. What is the AI tool or feature you're using to manage your content now, manage your content debt, if you have any? What is the AI tool you're using now as a go-to tool?
Yeah, so actually, I'm very excited to say that I have my content engineer who, well, we were just batting around titles this week, and I decided to soft promote him to be content engineer because he's really doing an amazing job. He's one of us, but he's very technically minded, and he has sort of been commissioned. We brought in a contractor in order to cover him for a while so that he can really focus on bringing us that further, move the needle on the AI so that we can be using AI a lot better. But as anyone who's sort of, seen these LinkedIn, I created this and this in Claude in 5 minutes, and then when you scratch the surface, you're like, okay, that's nice, but it doesn't really scale to an enterprise kind of company. So he's really had the opportunity to go deep. So now he's created a plugin for Figma. So I'll just share my screen quickly. And okay, just because I'm looking in one screen, do you see my screen? Do you see my Figma?
Not yet.
Not yet. Let's see what's going on.
I was going to say, yeah, now we can only see you at the moment. So
Yeah, okay. Okay, I see the problem. Let me just... I know it's because... Okay, so I don't think I can share my screen. So I'm just going to describe it to you. Basically, we have a plugin from Localize, who's our translation manager, where we'd go in and we'd be able to select text, and then we'd be able to give it a key and then sync it out to Localize. And then sort of in the back end, that's getting automatically translated once a week. So by the fact that the developer will take the key that we've created pretty fast into production, we'll have all the translations, which is fantastic and amazing, and keeps up with this sort of constant release mechanism that we have. But it was taking us a long time because the designers would finish and then we'd have a very short window of time before the developers needed to start working. We would often become bottlenecks, especially since there's content designers who are working on multiple different projects in front of different teams who all have different cadences and deadlines. And, it was very dynamic and agile, and we would have to keep up with that. If the text needed a variable, if we wanted to say the name of a document or the name of an employee or something like that, then it would take time. So now he's created this plugin, which is like really streamlining what we have. It's going and checking with Localize, does this key already exist? Like, do we have this text somewhere else so that we can just reuse it? It's sort of looking out for the style guide and things that will sort of help the texts get better. And it's just making the whole flow for us so much quicker. We've also been enabling some of our product designers to use it so that they will also be able to create keys so that we can more reduce this bottleneck that we had been getting into here and there. So that's really the most exciting thing that I'm using right now. I've been using it. He sort of was able to get it up to a certain level. Unfortunately, we couldn't get it using an MCP server because of a restriction in Figma itself, but it's doing a really good job, and I'm super proud of this guy for developing it for us. It's a really exciting jump forward into automating workflows and making sort of us more available to do the craft side of our jobs and less sort of the admin side. So that's great.
okay, all right, cool. So I guess I'll kick it over to Yossi then.
So in terms of AI, my team has gone through a bit of an evolution because at the beginning of this year, I decided that my team is going to become an AI first team, and to do that, I spent a lot of time developing a UI based vibe coded product, if you want to call it that, which was actually really useful. What it did was it helped you draft content. It helped you analyze your content against the style guide and give you a score to show you how you did and give you hints and tips about what you could do to fix it up. It helped you to compare your draft to the sources that you gave it to see if you made any mistakes, and it was pretty good, and my team was using it regularly. But then we experienced reduction in force in our company, unfortunately, and so my team was reduced by half. So we still had the same amount of work that we had to do, but we had to do it quicker and more efficiently. So I turned to Claude, and I basically took this UX based or UI based program, and I turned it into skills and a plugin in Claude, and it's really made like a tremendous amount of difference in how we in how we develop content now, because it because Claude has plugins for or connectors to all sorts of things to without taking without any effort really. We can connect to Jira, we can connect to the Document360 MCP server, right? We can connect to all sorts of resources on Google Drive and all that kind of thing. So now we can do everything that I mentioned before, but we could do it in a prompt, and the responses it gives are actually outstanding, and we can create a document from scratch to probably 75% good enough, right? Which means that it'll take a little bit of effort to bring it up to closer to 80, 90, 100%, but most of the work is done. So really what I'm saying is that when we adopted AI, like we've really gone now all in on AI. Like it's just our whole company is like just AI as much as possible, and this is really like 10x the amount of work that we can do. So just using Claude out of the box, right? It's not really good enough, right? You really have to put some effort into creating the skills that it needs to produce the kind of content that you want it to produce in the way that you want to produce it. And I think that with this kind of tool at our disposal, like we can really manage to keep up with the work, even though we have fewer people on hand. So it's actually it's not saying that the reduction in force was a great thing, but it really forced us to rethink how we handle the workload, and so that's how we're doing it. Yeah.
Okay, I'll throw it over to Yakov.
Okay, so I just want to give, I like to give two-part answers to these questions. So my first one is the biggest, most powerful AI thing that I use is Grammarly. Free Grammarly is amazing. It catches all my stupid typos and I'm not bad at grammar, but it's better than me. So, so that's just like a shout out for Grammarly. It's like a fantastic product. I don't pay for it. So, I'm not getting any money off me, but yeah, I love that. But, we also, I'm very excited to get a Claude license. I'm still waiting because it seems like it's way better than from GPT for what we need to do. But I use GPT, and the way that that it's really transformed the writing on the team is the ability to, you can just throw all types of content into it. So it's given me the ability. I call it kind of the storyteller, which is not something that I would have necessarily been able to do on my own. So going beyond the actual page that needs to be documented, the actual feature, into kind of like an industry wide, how does this fit into, I'm talking maybe not to an admin, maybe to a CTO. It's moving from maybe a customer to a POC document. And, the CTO or the CISO, they're asking a different type of questions. They have an entire security policy. I mean, again, in the cybersecurity space, they have an entire security policy. They're trying to figure out, do we align with it? And it's not a white paper, but it's a technical document, but it's very hard for me to speak in that language. I don't have experience in that world. So I can take, competitor content that's already been created. I can have a couple of Zoom meetings and throw those transcripts in, and then it creates the outline, and we go over the outline together, and then I get an article, and maybe in 2 days of work. So it's really, it's just given, it's like, in terms of that breadth, not just in terms of output, but in terms of the breadth of what I can now offer to the product team, it's put that on steroids. So that's been really, really tremendous.
Okay, cool. So I'm supposed to answer the question as well, but I'm going to blend it into the next question. So the next question is, so what does the documentation review process look like at your company? So I'll answer the last question, and then I'll start off with the answer to the next question as well. So at the moment, we have our own Slack agent that's AI agent. So everything goes through her essentially. And so this also impacts our review process. So today, this agent, this Slack agent, a Slack AI agent, is connected to Document360's MCP, Jira MCP, Salesforce MCP, every MCP you can think of. All of our company information is essentially connected to this agent. And so the way we're working now is, and this is my main AI feature now. And it's also the way this is how we currently review documentation. So we have multiple channels where, like you guys said earlier, support agents, salespeople, anybody can open a documentation request. And they can also, we also have a channel for issues that were closed because of or caused by a documentation gap or some sort of documentation error. So had the documentation been existed or been correct, the issue would have been fixed. And so what happens is automatically this agent generates, it reviews our existing documentation and says, okay, this documentation doesn't exist. And then it creates a new draft and then pushes it into a hidden folder in Document360. If the draft does exist, it creates a copy of the existing documentation and then adds a little word revised to the title. So we know, like, I don't want to overwrite the existing documentation before reviewing it. So I just create a duplicate and then, the agent alters the title and just throws in the word revised. And then, so it's a duplicate article. And so what's happening now is the review process is support agents, they're usually technically smarter about very specific areas in the product than I am and could be. And even in some of the cases, product managers. And so they can go into Document360 and review the draft already and say, hey, technically this information is correct. And then they put it into a reviewed status. And then I get notified and then I can go in and review it and then publish it according to our standards. The PMs, they have their own channel. So anytime a new feature is coming out or a fix to an existing feature, it also generates a draft for the documentation, throws it into a different hidden folder for them. And so they review it as well from their side. And then, again, I get a notification that this has been reviewed and then I can then review it. And then, we publish it when it needs to be published. And so that's the way our flows change. So again, the amount of writing, if I wasn't doing a lot of writing before, I'm doing a lot less now. And it's more about, knowledge management and essentially just trying to connect the dots between everybody. And so again, this agent is our key AI feature. And that's the way our review process is working out. So we've sort of democratized the review process. Previously, the review process was I would write a draft, I would send it to the relevant person, they would review it, I would review it, then I'd put it into Document360. Now the AI agent's doing everything. The SMEs are reviewing it in Document360, and then I'm just the one confirming it and pushing the button. So, okay. So wait, who did I not? Who did I not? Who's the next person? Or who wants to take the next question?
Give it to Yakov.
Okay. All right. Yeah. So,
I feel very low tech going after. Gideon is already 2 or 3 steps ahead of me. The only thing I was going to say is.
sorry. Just to reiterate, the question is review process. What's your review process today?
Yeah. So, so we work very closely with product managers. Those are our main, pretty much exclusively our SMEs. So we do have them manually review content before it goes out. Then we try to have a peer review for significant chunks of content. And then we also have like a sanity, like once it goes out, just to make sure that like the biggest problem that when you are fully in on it, you don't have a fresh set of eyes. And so you might miss something. So we just have a sanity review for that. But I the only thing I'll say, and this is we're also all in an AI and all the users are using it and everything else. But I do think that it's what I always what I have for the past 6 months I've been saying that you need to be a product expert. All the writers and everybody, we need to be product experts because it's very easy for AI to align what you're doing with whatever is most common out there, on the internet or what it's based on. And so that's really where, part of the review process is we really go to the PMs and we say, tell us what is the most common use case, because that's the type of thing that I think AI, I don't know. I find that it doesn't do a great job on it. And I think it's asking a lot of it. I guess eventually you could get it to have enough gong calls and whatever else that maybe it will be able to do that. So maybe that's just on me to be more AI, strong. But anyway, so yes. So yeah, the answer to the question was yes, we do still rely on PM reviews and the whole more manual process.
I will add one caveat though. When we started taking feedback, when we had this feedback channel, the AI did start creating a lot of AI slop. So we've had to refine the process and I disconnected for a weekend, came in, the next week, and I had like 100 articles all of a sudden. So we had to like turn it off for a bit and then start to go back. So if I sound the technologically savvy or anything, it's not without its problems. So
Yep.
feel free, whoever
Uh,
wants a review process question. So Yossi or Naomi, whoever, fight it out.
All right, I'll go.
Yeah,
Like,
so you-
I'll sit in the hot seat. So in 2025, at the beginning of 2025, I decided that one of the things my team really needed to focus on was quality. Okay, so 2025 was a year of quality in my team. So I instituted a mandatory process where every document that was either created or edited had to go through a 3-stage review process. The first stage was PM review, so they would review it from the perspective of product, scope, and that kind of thing. And then it would go through a technical review by a developer or a QA person who would actually perform the procedure if there was procedure, or make sure that they could understand the concepts if it was a conceptual document. And then the third process, part of the process, was a mandatory peer review. So we would share the reviews among the team. So each person will get a chance to review other people's documents, and they will get theirs reviewed by them. And so what that was actually a pretty good exercise, because number one, it gave the writers in the team the ability to see what's going on outside of their silos, so they could see what else is going on in the company. So they got to learn some things. And the other reason it was great was because when you're sending your document to your colleague to review from a technical writing perspective, you want to make sure that it's as high quality as possible so you don't get embarrassed. So it really helped to raise the quality. However, unfortunately, now we don't have the luxury of the bandwidth for the remaining members of my team to review documentation. So we still do the PM review and the technical writing. Sorry, the PM review and the technical review, and the peer review is now done by BigID, which is my plugin, my Claude plugin. And what BigID does is it analyzes the document against a trial guide and various rules. It provides score. You have to get over a score of 80 in order to be able to publish, and it will give you hints and tips as to what you can what the things you should do to improve the document. And then you do that. You do those things right through again until you get to at least 80%, and that is good enough for the peer review. It's much faster. It's not as good as a manual peer review, I don't think, but it's better than nothing, and it certainly helps keep the review process moving along. So that's how we do it.
Okay, cool. So I guess the last person is Naomi, and then I think we only have a few minutes left. So if anybody has any questions as well, in the audience, feel free to post those. But so Naomi, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm actually listening with a lot of interest to the three of you, because I think in our world of UX writing, the review was pretty much sort of part of the process of working on the Figma files. So the content designer is very involved in the whole system of sort of sitting down with product managers and the designer and the UX expert, sort of formulating together what the experience will look like. And then when the content goes in, it's sort of it's still a live collaborative working file that gets reviewed along the way. And I think sort of there would be points where maybe there was a message that would be slightly delicate, or we would want to put across to the users in a way that we really need to focus on sort of how to phrase something without sort of, again, delicate, sort of not making ourselves look bad, not making anyone else look bad, not shaming the user and that kind of thing. So those trickier areas, sometimes we would take offline, maybe we would need it, in a meeting or something like that. And I think one of the things that you've raised here is also feedback, which because we're content that's in the product and going out with the product, the feedback loop has often been minimal, sort of only when something was raised via CS or something like that, or there was something that definitely prevented people from doing something. But there's a big difference between good content and okay content, and if people can still complete their flows with okay content, then like you touched on earlier, people often don't complain, and they don't give feedback unless they're angry about something, and then they have a motivation to give feedback. So what we do have and what we are building out, and with the helps of AI, is sort of more sort of pushed feedback coming from gong calls or something like that AI can sort of collect more, specific feedback on a specific area and specific flows, and bring it back to us. We have our user experience team has done an excellent job of automating the feedback part, and now we need to, as our team and in content, we need to be able to harvest those feedbacks and translate them into, okay, this means that we're going to have to change the text here. So there's still a lot of work to be done. And, it's interesting to hear you and how you've all three implemented different ways of getting this feedback, both internal and external. And I think that's going to be sort of a challenge that sort of towards, 1 quarter from now, I'm going to be able to pick up and really sort of tie those dots together a lot more closely with the help of AI. So good to hear you guys talk.
All right, cool. So those were the questions I had. I think we hopefully we gave a lot of good information out. So because it's the field has really changed. What I was doing a year ago is completely different than from what I'm doing today. The theory and the basics are still there, but the amount of writing we're doing, it's more it's evolving to more and more knowledge, man. Feedback control, reviews, that's
Thank you all once again. We really enjoyed it. We'll be coming back with another very exciting webinar soon, with the same team if everyone's on board. And we look forward to you in another exciting session soon. Yeah. Thank you.